This is the Steve Shriver Podcast, where entrepreneur, adventurer, and community activist Steve Shriver shares what he's learned on his journey so you can make it in business and make it good. The big topic for this episode:
how to get through the tough times of entrepreneurship. You wouldn't know it because when I'm around you, I'm putting on this show like shooby-doo-wop. Hey, Steve Shriver's in the room. Hey, yeah. But then when I am at home, I'm like, I recharge at home.
We'll be right back. The Steve Shriver Podcast is brought to you by Ecolips, the original organic lip balm. Use the promo code podcast20 for 20% off your first order on ecolips.com. Ecolips, all natural organic lip balm. Deeply connected with nature, applying beneficial organic ingredients to better people's lives. A proud certified B Corp, founded in 2003. Ecolips, spread the good. And spread the promo code podcast20 into that promo code box. It's good for 20% off your first order on ecolips.com.
Hey. Welcome to the Steve Shriver Podcast. I am Steve Shriver and so stoked to be here for another edition of this podcast. Sitting here with producer and good friend of mine, Joe Coffey.
Hey, what's up?
Thanks for being here, Joe. And
always a pleasure.
Facilitating.
You bet.
So, yeah, man, we do this thing every podcast where we pull a topic out of the hat, out of one of Joe's nice fedoras, and we're going to do that shortly. Quick reminder, though, that are we on every channel that we could be on for podcast, or almost there?
I think we're on all the main ones.
Yeah.
But one thing different, we are on YouTube, too. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I think I would like to see what these guys look like.
Yeah.
We're on YouTube.
Yeah.
And we're dashing.
Yeah.
As you will see.
And it's very, it's very animated. There's things moving left and right all the time. Yeah.
Don't get to see the hammer of truth, which gets used occasionally on this show.
That's right. Yes. And I'm waving my arms right now.
Yes.
And you wouldn't see it if you weren't watching on YouTube. So we have a new sponsor to Ecolips, which is one of my great companies. And someday maybe we'll earn the sponsorship of a company that I don't own. But for now, we're going to go with that.
And it is appreciated. It is a legit sponsorship, and we're glad to have them on board.
Totally. And so I'd be talking about Ecolips in my stories, whether we were sponsored by them or not, but it's awesome. Pretty cool. So I'm going to dig into this hat, man.
All right.
So here we have topics that were given to us on our discussion groups, from our website submissions, and we are going to
Facebook.
Oh, and Facebook. That's right. And we are going to pull out a topic and discuss it today. So here's what are we going to be talking about, Joe?
Let's see.
How to get through the tough times of entrepreneurship.
Ooh,
that's a good topic.
That's a lot of times.
That's right? A good topic. Okay. Whew. Okay. Yeah, let's see here. Tough times in entrepreneurship. I feel like sometimes I am overly negative about entrepreneurship. It makes me think of the last time that I was going to talk to a college class, and I never like to do the same thing twice, give the same speech twice. And I said to my wife, Andrea, I'm like, what should I talk about today? Like entrepreneurship. I want to be, motivational, but at the same time, I want to be real. And she was just like, tell them the truth, like how you ended up in the hospital because your stress level was so high, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and so
that's heavy. But that's the real stuff.
Right. So the real entrepreneurship, right, is like you are constantly getting stress thrown at you left and right. And you have to problem solve your way through the stress, through the day, and hopefully come out on the other end in a positive note. I think, like, from the health perspective, I think it's really hard to be healthy, an entrepreneur who is healthy. Somebody
that's a big statement.
Yeah. I think I actually sent a text to my buddy Ryan Sunderman, who's an ER doc here in town, and I was like, I texted him one day because I'm like, I think it's impossible to build health and wealth at the same time. And he was like, that's bullshit, man. And I'm like, well, okay, but bear with me. Like when I'm building my wealth, I'm building my businesses. And while I'm doing that and working my ass off, 80 hours a week, something is being sacrificed. And typically, my health is getting pulled in one direction. Well, my wealth is getting pulled the other direction. And I haven't figured out how to get around that. I just have embraced it and said, this is how it's going to go. So, yeah. So,
okay. So we're going to unpack that on this episode.
Yeah.
So
that's what we're doing.
Where do you begin in explaining this to people?
So all right, let's start with this. What type of things could occur in your business that are going to cause your stress? What's going to cause these problems? Because it's kind of like when you're writing a business plan and you're, like a lot of times we're writing it in this utopian way. It's like, I'm going to, first year 1, year 2, year 3, and I'm going to build it, grow it, boom. And I'm making money and I'm hiring employees. But what we typically don't put in the plan is what we don't really know or expect. And so the type of things that can occur in a business on a daily basis that you might not realize right now, and you might have gone through some of these, but like you might get sued, you might get a lawsuit, right? It might just be a simple cease and desist. Like when we first had, Virgin Body Care was the first company that we were making lip balm and soap with. It was our Virgin Body Care because we used virgin olive oil. And a guy by the name of Richard Branson sent me a cease and desist that we could not use the word virgin in our company name. And at the time it was devastating. Even though we were small, it was just like, wait, this guy can't tell me. He can't tell me what I can call my name. But then actually he could, because he owned the trademark in the category for body care. But so a cease and desist. But what that does to you is for that day, that week, that month where you're dealing with it, not knowing if you're going to challenge it, you have this, all of a sudden you just have this level of stress going on. And oh, by the way, you're also running your business, putting out other fires. But other things that might happen, you might have a product recall, a bad review online that goes viral, a key employee who quits, or you have to fire. You might have an employee get injured. These are all very random things that can and probably will occur in a growing business. If you're a manufacturer, you might have a piece of equipment, you have a deadline, you have a piece of equipment that fails and you can't get a part in for another week, 2 weeks, a month. Sometimes the IRS reaches out to you and they say, hey, Steve, you owe us money, and you might not have known about it. And it could be a big chunk. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you could have a big customer go out of business and who owes you a lot of money at the same time.
Ouch.
Yeah. I mean,
I bet this list is
right. Yeah.
Huge. Competitors eat your lunch.
Right.
Product launch failure, recall.
Right.
Someone slips and falls on your floor and
liability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those things will happen. One of those things will probably happen to you if you're successful, right? If your reach is great enough and you touch enough people, you are going to have some of these things happen to you. So you can, so one is like, okay, how do you get through those times? Typically for me, which is not always great, but the first thing I do is be like, I need a beer. Like a lot of times. Just like, I love it. Let me process this. And hey, Joe, are you available? Because I got to have a beer and I got to talk through this.
Got to think of that.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem with that sort of like that approach is it's cool to have a beer to help you like through that moment. In my opinion, it's not cool to like hit the bottle hard to wait until, you come out on the other end of whatever that problem that is. So alcohol and drugs, not the greatest answer to help you get through this stuff, but I think that it's okay to use it as a medium to have chat with a friend over your problem solving
And begin processing.
Begin processing. That's right. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, where do you go to try to solve these problems? Before I go there though, I want to talk about a couple health issues that I've had or seen people have. And again, I don't want to be like the total bearer of bad news about entrepreneurship, but just the reality is that some of this stuff will happen. We all handle stress a different way, and you should be ready for the battle, for the fight, for the challenge on your constitution and your body that's gonna ensue. So, we have this thing in common that I don't love to talk about, but when I get under a
skin peel thing, yeah, it's a thing,
right? When I get under a lot of stress, but not to the point where I'm like in the hospital from the stress, but like my skin gets scaly, flaky, and then
yes,
on my hands.
But it's tingly for a few days first, right? To the touch, and then it starts to peel.
Yep. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I've got like exposed, red, inflamed skin, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a good indicator. So I think it's like being aware of like what your initial triggers are. If migraines or headaches, if you know that you're going like, okay, I know I'm under a lot of stress right now and this is starting to happen. That's a time where you should start like reeling back in. And actually that's when I'll communicate to Andrea and my kids and be like, okay, I'm in a stressful time. I'm dealing with some stuff. I'm not trying to make this all about me, but just so you know, like my skin is flaking. Okay. That's an indicator.
I was going through that one time and I went to my doctor and I'm like, hey doctor, I have this skin peely thing. I don't know what this is. It's not in WebMD, but a friend of mine has it too. And my doctor was like, oh, well, what did his doctor say? And I said, well, his doctor said it's related to stress and I'm not going to give you anything for it. Just cut down on your stress, learn how to breathe and do all this stuff. Yeah. And so I looked at him and he said, well, that's what I'm going to tell you.
Right.
True story.
That's great. I'm assuming he still charged you for that visit though. I
bet he did.
Yeah, probably.
I bet he did.
I mean,
so your doctor's advice was right. And it's kind of flowing into the discussion here. I mean, there's a certain amount of stress. Be ready for it. It's going to happen.
Yep.
And if you're ready to handle stress, there are strategies there.
Right.
You're one step ahead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's still all so much easier said than done. I mean, when you're trying to run your business, run your day, build, grow, sit in front of a customer and be upbeat while you're making a pitch. And meanwhile, you've got tingly fingers and a migraine coming on, So, but yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that over time toughens you up too. You're like, okay, I know this is what I'm going to deal with. I got to build up my tolerance to this sort of thing. And on the flip side, work on stress mitigation. So the other part, so now we're going to get into like the problem solving, so now we got to solve the problem, get through it. And that's where I think that having your network of people that you are going to lean on, and whether it's professional or personal help, I would say let's talk professionally first. Having your bankers, accountants, and insurance, and your legal team who can help you if it's a cash flow issue. You got your banker and accountant. If it's a legal issue, you got your attorney. Setting that up in advance of setting that important professional network up in advance of the challenges is really important.
In a way to where you say, hey, I might need you. Let's be ready if I ever run into, are you available?
Yeah.
Just that kind of a conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, ideally you're doing, you've got some rapport, it might be the same attorney you use to set up your LLC or that you use for some business contracts, and you find out what they're good at. I mean, if it's a specific specialized thing like a trademark infringement, you might not have that guy in your network, but hopefully a guy that has that person or that, Insurance is really fascinating here because if you have the right insurance, it can really be a problem solver for you. And it's like the most, some of the most boring meetings I've ever sat in are with insurance agents. Okay. I'm just speaking it, the truth, but having the right insurance, sometimes I feel like I'm overinsured, but then we'll have we had the plumbing on the floor above us came down and ruined a pallet of goods. And we had insurance that covered not only the cost of that, and not only the next level of covering the cost would be to cover the wholesale cost. And the next level is to cover the retail cost of it. Well, in our plan, we had a plan that policy that covered the retail cost of that pallet of goods. So it was great. It solved that problem for us. So like making sure you're not overinsured, but having enough insurance that, whether it's there's, like a natural disaster came through the derecho. We talk about it a lot. And when that comes through, and making sure that you have the right insurance policy to cover the damages from that can ease the stress a lot, because a lot of the problems related to growth and entrepreneurship are related to money and how that's going to impact your life. So,
and good insurance people will find a way to insure you for whatever it is.
Yep.
You've heard the old saying, they'll insure a coin toss. So I don't know if that's true.
Right.
But I was with an ad agency a long time ago in Waco, Texas, and we were putting up a big billboard by the highway with a big heart on it, something about heart for some hospital or something. And my job was to find an insurance person to insure if that thing were to fall and kill people or whatever. And it blew my mind how easy it was to just set that up and print some numbers, and everybody slept better.
Right. I have life insurance policies taken out on my key people. It's key person insurance. And because I've had a key person in my business pass away, it was devastating to the business. Never would have anticipated it. We had an insurance policy taken out on him that helped us get through the next 6 months to a year.
That's huge.
Right. And it's one of these things, the strangest conversation, like, hey man, I'm going to be taking out an insurance policy on your life, and I'm going to be the beneficiary. Well, or the business is going to be the beneficiary of it. And you got to go do a physical and do this stuff. But, it's the reality of life, is that, people will pass away. So again, like these really, really devastating moments in your work, in your company, having some mitigation of the risk through proper insuring. Yeah, we just plugged insurance like crazy, didn't we?
How did you know that? You're talking about the Mark Patterson story, devastating thing at Ecolips. Super nice guy. He did so much for the company. This was at a time when you were kind of an absentee CEO doing stuff for Frontier. How did you know to take out that policy? Like, who gave you that advice? Because that was a lifesaver.
Right. It was a good insurance person who was like, hey, if you're, knowing it was the economy was terrible at the time. It was 2008 to 2012. And it was like, okay, and our company wasn't performing really well at the time either. And it was like, hey, for $12 a month, you could insure this person. And we actually did it with our, top 5 people at the time. Okay. And I was like, hey, it seems like a good bet. I hope we never, ever have to use this. Right. Yeah.
So insurance.
Yeah. So work on that team, that professional team. And then when it comes to personal, I like to have, I like to think about mentors by the dozen. I don't want to have one mentor telling me, that's like the only person I go to for everything, because I need differing perspectives. But having a network of friends, family, and mentors that can help you through the time, depending on what it is. Sometimes it's literally just a phone call to a friend. Sometimes it might be a meeting with a group of friends, like, hey, I'm dealing with this issue right now. And then even next level would be like networking groups, whether they're online or in person, life coaches, and therapists, like,
huge.
Right. Yeah. We all can use help at certain times.
Yeah.
So, Yeah. And then business coaches too. So I think that, like, I wouldn't say don't overthink it in the early days, but don't underestimate the fact that because a lot of us are like running, this is like a kind of a lone wolf kind of game, this entrepreneur thing, right? And no matter if we have employees and this network, you still feel like it's a pretty lonely situation a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And so I would say just know that someday you're going to need somebody to lean on. And it's better to have that network set up. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me take you back to therapy for 1 second. I want to hear this in your words. There are people out there who, for whatever reason, they look at that industry and they're like, that's not for me, or I don't believe it, or whatever. And I'm hearing you say, well, we've talked about it. We both have therapists. And, what can you tell folks to kind of break down this resistance or misunderstanding or whatever you want to call it? Like, therapists can be great, and you don't just have to be in the middle of a massive problem.
I think, let's see here. For one, there are, I'm sure there are therapists that are great and some that aren't. And I have gone to some that I didn't go back to, right? Yeah. It's like, you go get a bad haircut or something you like. I think it's interesting. I don't know what percentage of the population has some sort of mental issues, but I think that we all can use that help, right?
Yeah.
When I needed therapy the most, it was at a time when I understood myself the least, and they helped bring clarity into my own understanding. What I didn't realize about myself is that I have social anxiety, but you wouldn't know it, because when I'm around you, I'm putting on this show like shooby-doo wop. Hey, Steve Shriver's in the room. Hey, yeah. But then when I am at home, I'm like, I recharge at home. Some people, like true extroverts get energy from being around people, and introverts, get energy from being alone. And I went through a process with my therapist to understand who I was, how I operated, how I functioned. And because now that I know that about myself, I understand myself better. Now I can perform better.
Yeah.
For the world and for myself and for my family.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I would think that would be really encouraging to folks who have never heard that
Right.
before. I mean,
right.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So and it's just like, I think there's going to be some sessions that are more valuable than others. Just like, this podcast some will resonate with people more than another one would, So this is good. Let's get deep. Let's get deep. I'm going to drop the hammer of truth.
Here we go. The hammer of truth. What's the truth? Bring it.
So I just got back from this trip to Nepal, and I was talking to this very wise old man, and he said, let's see here. I got to think about the conversation. I'm talking to him about he's probably 75 years old. He's been through recently the earthquake in Nepal that just devastated the entire country. He's been through famine in a big way, where they're living for years on potatoes or whatever, and COVID. Then there's this thing where every few years it seems like the Maoists come and take over the entire country and overthrow the government of Nepal. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's just they're in a vulnerable space. Yet this guy and many Nepalese people walk around with smiles on their faces, and they're the happiest people on the earth. And I'm like, how do you continue smiling? How do you get through these tough times and you're still smiling? And he said, I take the hardest times comfortably. Like, I take the hardest times comfortably. And I'm like, what is that? What does that even mean? So I had a friend, translate it for me, and they were like, well, it's kind of like his it's his karma. We call it dharma, but where he knows like he just needs to be strong and get through that, because everything is an episode. It's gonna have a start and a finish, and he's not going to be purposely be miserable through those times. He's going to try to be as comfortable as possible. And there's a level of like strength that comes with that, just like, all right, I'm going to just suffer through this, but with an optimistic approach.
My mind is racing right now of all the times I did not follow that great advice.
Right.
That is heavy. That's
right.
Fantastic.
Right.
Wow.
And then he says, also, your worries can be the fire, and you can continually stoke the flames with your worries, or you can let your worries be the smoke and let them disappear into the air.
That's cool.
Right. I'm like, okay, that dude that's where I want to be mentally, right? So this is my 4th trip to Nepal. That happened a couple trips ago. And I tried, now that I know this and I operate with that inside of me, I'm like, okay, cool. I need to try to live that. It's so hard to sit there with a smile on your face when you're having problems, but it can be done.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, you're not punching walls and cursing and,
Yeah.
the sky's falling, thinking,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. That was worth the hammer of
Yeah.
truth. That was massive.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, I mean, if we want to go any deeper into any of this, it's weird talking about all of like the bad stuff that's going to happen in entrepreneurship, because one of the reasons we get into this is because of all the good stuff that can happen. And I guess I feel like somebody's got to, and thanks to Andrea for reminding me of that too, like somebody's got to remind us that, it's not all going to be bliss. It's going to be tough.
Yeah. What about when it is tough and you're maintaining as an entrepreneur and you have to make that decision about, maybe this one just isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. Let's just shut this thing down, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'll try another one, but you could keep hammering away on that one.
That's probably the toughest decision for any entrepreneur to make, because your ego gets in the way of that whole thing. But the fact is, the numbers don't lie. The data doesn't lie. If you are failing, you should recognize it and and the sooner, fail as fast and cheap as you possibly can, because you're going to sit there and just milk until you're even worse off. So,
and you learn from it. Years down the road, you look back and you're like, thank God I learned this lesson and that lesson.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not sure if I've talked about this one before, but the carpet cleaning business that I had, Be Green Carpet Clean, it was all set up to be the first carpet cleaning business in Iowa that was sustainable, environmentally focused.
Great idea.
Yeah. And then we had to close it down. It just wasn't performing well. I wasn't putting enough energy into it. I didn't have the right people in place, putting the right kind of energy into it. And eventually it was like, okay, it was a low six figure loss that we had to just take the hit on and recover from. But there's other times where I think people would have given up on Ecolips several times. We had some really rough years. And there are people that were advisors that this it's not going well, Steve, have you thought about closing it down? And knowing how tough the times were that we went through, I think some people would have just said, this is not worth it. It's just not worth it. So that's, I guess the magic of it is there's no right answer. But if you feel like you can persevere and, you feel like you can make it through and you're resilient enough to handle it and you make it and you're still alive and good health and, and you can get a feeling of momentum under your belt again after going through one of these times, then you win.
I know we're running out of showtime here, but I want to ask you about, you mentioned as you keep going, you could choose to kind of shut it down or keep going. You said sometimes ego is an entrepreneur thing that can keep them from realizing maybe the numbers aren't there, dude. Are there other things on that list? Is ego's at the top? Other things, say an entrepreneur listening to this podcast is out there having that thought like, do I shut it down or do I keep going? What else could be in my way, clouding my judgment?
Jeez. When you think about, so the ego is more about how you're going to look to other people and how that's going to make you feel. But then what the toughest thing is, when you have obligations to other people and people are depending on your business, whether it's vendors or employees, or community, I think that's a pretty major reason why people wouldn't want to give up. So, I mean, you have ego, you have the other people that are, that you're supporting, off the cuff.
Tough.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else right now, but I'm sure after we end it, I'll be like, hey, this, but that's the part of this where we'll dig into that another time.
All right. So let me read this back to you, Steve. Tell me if I got it right. Don't hesitate. If I get a D+ on this, I get a D+. So we're talking about getting through the tough times. I heard you talk about you have to process first. When you're in tough times, you have to just stop for a moment. You said you will have a beer. You don't rely on alcohol or drugs. That's not part of the process. But in your case, a simple beer helps you process. Stress mitigation, kind of being ready for stress could be a big part of it. So solving for stress, you mentioned having a network of people already set up to be ready for you should you need them. That's part of your MO.
Yep.
You mentioned insurance is huge. Sounds silly and simple, but it's been a lifesaver for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And personal mentors, part of that network. I like how you described you have mentors by the dozen.
Yeah.
You don't have one guru for all things. You have a lot of people. You'll talk to friends who aren't even business people sometimes, but you've got them all lined up, ready to go.
And sometimes it'll be like Mary Quas is a local business rock star and just a good person. And I don't talk to her once every 2 or 3 years. And then I'm like, oh my God, I need Mary. And then thankfully, she answers the call. But yeah, so it's one of those things too. It doesn't have to be regular touch points either. But yeah, I think you covered that pretty well, Joe.
Okay, all right. So that's the network, and you brought this cool stuff to the table from literally a Nepalese guru who said, "Take the hard times comfortably."
Yeah,
that is so deep. I love it. And what was the other thing about your worries can be the fire, or they can be the smoke?
Right.
That's
magic.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And then to wrap it up, you said when it comes down to a cut bait or fish, if you're going to fail as fast as you can. And you had some advice as well for thinking about what could be clouding your judgment in that moment. And I love how you can, like a lot of entrepreneurs, you can talk about stories where maybe a business failed and you moved on, you learned from it, and that can be part of it too.
Yeah. Failing forward is a term that people say, and failure's not fun, but make friends with it if you can, just not too often.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
So I think that's it, man. Thank you everybody for watching, listening. Check us out on Facebook, follow Steve Shriver Podcast. You can go to steveshriverpodcast.com. You can watch us on YouTube. Thanks Ecolips for your sponsorship. Thank you community for doing what we do as crazy entrepreneurs. Thank you, Joe.
Always a pleasure. And if you have an idea for a future topic, we'll throw it in the hat. Just follow us on Facebook, Steve Shriver Podcast.
Awesome.
The Steve Shriver Podcast is brought to you by Ecolips, the original lip balm. Use the promo code podcast20 for 20% off your first order at ecolips.com. Keep up with the show at steveshriverpodcast.com and the Steve Shriver Podcast on Facebook.